For centuries, humanity was considered an afterthought, a minor species clinging to a single star system on the galactic fringe. Too short-lived, too divided, too loud. When humans first stepped onto the interstellar stage, the galaxy barely noticed. And when it did, it decided, quickly, that humanity did not matter. They were ignored in trade negotiations, dismissed in strategic briefings, spoken over in council chambers filled with ancient voices and older egos. Humanity's ships were crewed by galactic standards, their technology inelegant, their culture chaotic and difficult to classify. Where other species presented centuries of unified doctrine, humans arrived with disagreement, debate, and a stubborn refusal to fit neatly into anyone else's system. The powerful found them annoying. The ancient found them laughable. The Galactic Council labeled humanity non-essential. At first, the exclusion was soft. Observer status instead of representation. Limited access to shared hyperspace corridors. Temporary restrictions placed on human expansion for the sake of galactic stability. Humanity protested, politely at first, then firmly, but their warnings were met with patronizing reassurances. "You are not ready," the Council said. "You will understand in time. This is for your own good." Then came the Exile. A single vote, passed during a routine session most humans were never informed about. Council space was closed. Trade rights revoked. Navigation access denied. Human colonies found themselves suddenly cut off from the greater galaxy, sealed behind bureaucratic force fields and enforced patrols. The Council called it containment. Humanity heard the truth in the silence that followed. They were unwanted. The galaxy expected the usual outcome. Young species failed this test every cycle. Isolation bred scarcity. Scarcity bred conflict. Conflict tore civilizations apart long before any external threat was needed. The Council had seen it countless times, and recorded it as unfortunate but necessary. Humanity was expected to fracture. Earth would argue with the colonies. The colonies would turn inward. Resources would run dry. Governments would fall. And when the dust settled, the survivors would beg for readmission. Smaller, quieter, grateful. That was how the system worked. But humanity had never followed expected paths. What the Council mistook for weakness had always been something else. Humanity's chaos was not decay, it was flexibility. Their arguments were not fractures, they were stress tests. Their short lives bred urgency, not fear. They did not surrender to exile. They adapted to it. The galaxy never saw the shift happen. Council sensors recorded declining human traffic and assumed decay. Analysts noted the absence of human diplomacy and marked it as political collapse. No one thought to look closer. No one asked what happens when a species that evolved on a hostile world, one shaped by scarcity, predators, and constant crisis, is pushed into a corner with nothing left to lose. No one realized that exile was not a punishment. It was permission. Permission to unify. Permission to innovate without restraint. Permission to prepare. By the time the galaxy finally looked back toward human space, it would realize the mistake was not underestimating humanity. The mistake was giving them time. And when that time ran out, the Council would understand one simple, terrifying truth. Exiling humanity had not removed a problem. It had created one. Exile was only the beginning. Once humanity was formally cast out, the Galactic Council moved quickly to ensure the decision could never be challenged. What had started as containment hardened into oppression, enforced with the same cold efficiency the Council had perfected over millennia. Trade was the first weapon. Human merchant vessels were denied docking rights across Council space. Contracts were voided overnight. Ships already in transit were impounded under newly invented regulations, their cargo seized for review and never returned. Entire human industries collapsed in weeks, not from failure, but from suffocation. The Council called it economic stabilization. Rights vanished next. Human travelers lost legal protections the moment they crossed former Council borders. Appeals were rejected without review. Human-owned stations were reclassified as security risks and dismantled by Council patrols. Even humanitarian requests, medical shipments, disaster relief, were delayed until they were no longer useful. Humanity's voice in galactic affairs was erased with bureaucratic precision. Observer status revoked. Representation nullified. All treaties declared void due to non-compliance. Human diplomats were escorted out of council facilities under armed guard, their credentials deactivated in real time. No accusations were made. No crimes listed. The message was clear enough. You no longer exist here. Then the borders closed. Council fleets established exclusion zones around every known human system. Automated sentry arrays broadcast warnings in a dozen languages, declaring human space restricted under penalty of force. Independent traders were fined, arrested, or simply disappeared for violating the blockade. Humanity was pushed into isolation, not by distance, but by design. The Council expected collapse. They expected Earth's fragile political balance to fracture under resource shortages. They expected colonies to revolt as supply chains failed. They expected desperation, infighting, and eventual surrender. This was not cruelty in their minds. It was precedent. They had done this before. Young species that grew too fast, innovated too freely, or refused to submit to council oversight were quietly isolated until they broke. Those that survived learned obedience. Those that didn't were recorded as unfortunate losses to instability. The council waited. Months passed. Then years. Human space grew quiet. Traffic logs thinned. Communication intercepts dwindled. No distress calls crossed council borders. No refugee ships fled toward safer systems. Analysts nodded to one another and marked the situation as progressing within acceptable parameters. Containment was working. What the Council did not see were the changes taking place behind sealed borders. They did not see rival human governments dismantle old hostilities in the face of extinction. They did not see industries reorganized overnight, civilian production retooled for survival. They did not see research programs once restricted by interstellar treaties explode into existence. They saw silence and mistook it for decay. The truth was far more dangerous. Isolation had not weakened humanity. It had stripped away restraint. And while the Galactic Council congratulated itself on preventing a future threat, humanity was learning exactly what kind of galaxy they lived in. One that would push them into the dark and expect them to break there. Isolation did not destroy humanity. It clarified them. For most of their history, humans had been divided by borders drawn in blood and ink. Nations competed. Corporations hoarded power. Colonies argued with Earth, and Earth argued with itself. Even as they reached for the stars, humanity carried its old fractures with it. The Galactic Council believed Exile would widen those cracks. Instead, it erased them. The moment the borders closed and the last Council transmission went silent, the illusion of external protection vanished. There would be no appeals. No allies. No intervention. Humanity understood, all at once, that survival was no longer a shared responsibility. It was theirs alone. Emergency councils formed across human space. Old rivals found themselves seated at the same tables, staring at the same projections. Supply shortages, hostile borders, and a galaxy that had decided they were expendable. Arguments flared. Humans argued by instinct, but they ended differently now. Not with stalemate. With decisions. Earth set the tone. Not as a ruler, but as a rally point. The colonies answered, not out of loyalty, but necessity. Fragmentation meant extinction. Unity meant a chance. Within a single cycle, treaties older than interstellar flight were dissolved. Corporate sovereignties were stripped away. Military commands that once planned for internal conflict were merged into a single defensive framework. The United Human Command was born, not by conquest, but by consensus forged under threat. It was imperfect. Human systems always were. But it was adaptable, resilient, and brutally honest about its purpose. Survive. Every colony stood under one command. Resources were pooled without negotiation. Agricultural worlds fed industrial hubs. Research stations shared data openly, their breakthroughs no longer buried under patents or profit margins. Shipyards once bound by competing contracts synchronized production as if guided by a single will. Isolation forced efficiency. Redundancy became doctrine. Every system learned to function alone if cut off, yet seamlessly reconnect when possible. Supply chains were hardened against sabotage. Communications were rebuilt with layered encryption and independent relays, ensuring no single failure could sever humanity again. And slowly, something changed. Humans stopped thinking of themselves as scattered worlds. They began to think of themselves as a single civilization. Children grew up hearing stories not of interhuman wars, but of the day the galaxy turned its back. Education shifted from competition to preparedness. History lessons emphasized survival, adaptation, and the cost of trusting distant powers with your future. Culture followed strategy. Art grew sharper, defiant. Music carried rhythms of endurance rather than celebration. Stories no longer ended with salvation from outside forces. They ended with humanity standing its ground, together. If no one else would protect them, they would protect themselves. Civilian research merged with military necessity. Medical advances fed into battlefield survivability. Terraforming technologies were repurposed into planetary defense systems. Construction methods designed for hostile environments became the foundation for ships and stations meant to endure the unthinkable. Humanity did not become an empire. They became a shield, turned inward first. By the time the Galactic Council's long-range sensors noticed something unsettling, human systems no longer behaving like isolated points, but like coordinated nodes in a larger structure. It was already too late. Humanity was no longer divided enough to be controlled. They had learned the lesson Exile was meant to teach, and turned it into a weapon. From that moment on, humanity no longer waited for protection. They were the protection. For themselves. And soon, whether the galaxy liked it or not. For everyone else. Silence settled over human space. To the Galactic Council, it looked like decay. To humanity, it was freedom. With no observers, no inspectors, and no treaties left to violate, human innovation surged forward unchecked. Research programs once throttled by interstellar regulations were reopened overnight. Projects labeled too dangerous, too unstable, or ethically questionable were re-evaluated under a single new standard. Will this keep us alive? In that quiet, humanity evolved. Engineers abandoned traditional hyperspace models, questioning assumptions the galaxy had treated as unbreakable laws. New engines emerged, drives that did not merely traverse space, but reshaped it. Human vessels no longer relied on predictable corridors. They could enter, exit, and maneuver through warped spacetime in ways no Council sensor grid was designed to detect. To the galaxy, human space appeared stagnant. In reality, it was accelerating beyond comprehension. Defensive science followed close behind. Where Council shields focused on absorbing energy, human shields learned to redirect it. Incoming force was folded, diffused, and bled into higher dimensional layers of space. Weapons that could shatter cruisers simply vanished on contact, their energy dispersed as harmless distortion. Test results repeated a single phrase. Integrity maintained. Hull design transformed as well. Ships were no longer built from static alloys, but grown from adaptive composites, materials that reconfigured under stress, hardened where struck, and healed over time. Damage became information. Every hit made the next one less effective. Unbreakable was never the goal. Survivable was. Shipyards expanded in places the Council never monitored, inside hollowed asteroids, beneath the crusts of dead worlds, drifting within gravitational shadows where probes failed and sensors lied. Entire fleets were assembled beyond the galaxy's notice, their existence hidden not by secrecy, but by irrelevance in the Council's eyes. And these fleets were different. They were not designed for intimidation or conquest. There were no ceremonial flagships, no ornamental structures meant to project dominance. Human vessels were blunt, modular, and ruthlessly efficient. Every ship could fight. Every ship could repair another. Every ship could operate alone or as part of a seamless whole. Doctrine evolved alongside technology. Human fleets trained to expect losses and continue regardless. Command structures were decentralized, capable of instant adaptation when leaders fell. Artificial intelligences did not replace human judgment. They amplified it, processing chaos faster than any organic mind could alone. While the galaxy looked away, consumed by its own politics, rivalries, and ancient assumptions, humanity prepared. Not for glory, not for expansion. For the day preparation would be the difference between survival and extinction. Council analysts eventually noticed inconsistencies. Energy readings that did not match known outputs. Empty systems that should have shown economic collapse, but didn't. Hyperspace distortions that vanished before they could be confirmed. The reports were filed. Debated. Ignored. After all, humanity was exiled. Isolated. Contained. They were supposed to be fading. No one asked the more dangerous question. What if exile hadn't weakened humanity at all? What if it had removed the last restraints holding them back? By the time the galaxy realized the silence was not emptiness, but discipline, humanity was ready. And when they finally chose to be seen again, the galaxy would understand the cost of looking away. The first system fell without warning. One moment it was a thriving junction of trade lanes and habitats, billions of lives moving through ordered chaos. The next, it was silent. Orbital defenses lay in drifting fragments. Planets burned beneath precise, methodical strikes. Survivors who escaped spoke of fleets that ignored shields, weapons that unraveled matter itself, and soldiers who advanced without hesitation or mercy. The galaxy gave the invaders a name. The Dominion. No one knew where they came from. Their technology did not match any known precursor lineage. Their ships bore no symbols of diplomacy or conquest. They did not broadcast demands or ultimatums. They arrived. They conquered. They moved on. Worlds fell in rapid succession. Some were annihilated from orbit. Others were stripped, resources harvested, infrastructure dismantled. Entire populations were taken alive, loaded into vast transports and vanished into Dominion space. Species were enslaved. Not for labor alone, but for experimentation, assimilation, and purposes no intercepted data could fully explain. Civilization after civilization collapsed before Council response fleets could even mobilize. Panic spread faster than information. Trade routes shattered. Refugee armadas clogged hyperspace lanes. Emergency signals screamed across every frequency until the noise itself became meaningless. The great powers of the galaxy, empires that had endured for thousands of years, found their fleets erased in hours. The Dominion adapted faster than anyone had ever seen. Every failed tactic was learned. Every successful defense was countered. Every victory the Council claimed became irrelevant by the next engagement. And the Galactic Council convened. They argued. Some demanded total war. Others called for negotiation, insisting no sentient species could be so utterly hostile. Old grudges resurfaced as rival empires accused one another of provoking the invasion. Votes were cast, recast, delayed. While they debated, systems burned. Council-aligned fleets died buying minutes instead of victories. Defensive lines collapsed as soon as they were formed. Entire species petitioned for emergency evacuation and were denied due to logistical constraints. The Council had never faced an enemy like this. For the first time in its long history, its authority meant nothing to the threat advancing toward its core worlds. And then someone said it. Quietly. Reluctantly. We should contact humanity. The chamber froze. The idea felt obscene. Humanity, exiled, sanctioned, erased from galactic affairs, had been dismissed for years as a solved problem. They were isolated, contained, irrelevant. Weren't they? Objections followed immediately. They are too small. They were never tested in real interstellar war. They were expelled for instability. But the data told a different story. Dominion fleets advanced aggressively through Council space, then slowed near former human exclusion zones. Recon probes sent toward human systems never returned. No Dominion occupation markers appeared anywhere near human territory. Human space was untouched. No burning worlds. No refugee signals. No signs of panic. Just silence. Fear crept into the Council chamber, not of the Dominion alone, but of what that silence implied. With no other options left, the Council authorized an emergency transmission. Sanctions were bypassed. Restrictions ignored. The signal crossed borders the Council itself had sealed years earlier and entered human space without challenge. The reply came almost instantly. Not from a civilian authority. Not from a diplomat. From unified human command. The human on the screen looked calm. Not desperate. Not eager. Not surprised. "You are requesting assistance," the human said, voice steady, factual. The council speaker straightened. Pride died in their throat. The Dominion threatens all sentient life. Past actions can be reconsidered. Exile lifted. Trade restored. Humanity will be welcomed back into the galaxy as a full partner. There it was. The unspoken assumption that forgiveness could be purchased. The human did not react. "You exiled us," the commander said evenly. "You cut us off. You decided we were expendable." The council speaker tried to respond, but the human continued. "The Dominion is not a surprise to us." That sentence struck harder than any accusation. "We identified the possibility of an external predatory civilization decades ago," the commander said. "We prepared accordingly." Murmurs spread through the chamber. "Our fleets were not built for conquest," the human added. "They were built to ensure that no one, council or otherwise, could ever decide our extinction again." The speaker leaned forward, desperation breaking through protocol. "Will you help us?" A pause followed, long enough for the council to understand how powerless they truly were. "Yes," the human said at last. Relief flooded the chamber. Then came the condition. "But not under your authority." Silence returned, thick and absolute. "We will engage the Dominion," the commander continued. "We will halt their advance. We will protect civilian populations where possible. But humanity does not fight to restore your control." The human's gaze hardened. "We fight because if we don't, no one will be left to argue." The transmission ended. Across human space, dormant systems awakened. Shipyards unlocked. Fleets that had never appeared on any council registry powered up in perfect coordination. And as Dominion sensors detected vast, structured movements in regions they had deliberately avoided. For the first time since the invasion began, the Dominion slowed. Because something new had entered the war. Not a fractured council. Not an aging empire. But a united humanity. Forged in exile. Hardened by abandonment. And finally ready to face the threat the galaxy could not. The council would soon learn the final cost of exile. Humanity had survived it. And now, they were about to end the war. On their terms. The Galactic Council expected absolution. They had lifted the exile. Restored trade rights. Offered humanity a permanent seat, shared command authority, and public acknowledgement of regrettable excesses. In council history, this was generosity. This was how wounds were meant to be healed. Humanity did not celebrate. They evaluated. Within unified human command, the offer was dissected line by line. Strategic projections overlaid Dominion advance vectors. Civilian risk estimates were recalculated. Every promise from the Council was compared against centuries of precedent, and found wanting. Forgiveness was not the question. Survival was. The Council's follow-up transmissions grew more urgent by the day. Each carried new concessions, broader authority, louder assurances of partnership. Beneath them all lay the same assumption. Humanity would be grateful. They were not. At last, a single reply was transmitted, short, unadorned, and broadcast without ceremony. "We will decide when to act." The words struck the council chamber like a physical blow. Some delegates bristled at the defiance. Others felt something colder settle in their cores. Humanity was not negotiating. They were stating a fact. The galaxy no longer dictated their timetable. Behind sealed borders and encrypted networks, humanity moved. Activation orders rippled across human space. Fleets long held in readiness began final synchronization. Deep space installations emerged from stealth, their mass hidden until the last possible moment. Strategic positions were calculated not in 2 dimensions, but across hyperspace topology itself. Humanity was not forming a battle line. They were shaping the battlefield. Then, space began to tremble. Sensors across the galaxy registered impossible readings. Hyperspace currents twisted under artificial strain. Long-range observatories reported stars flickering as if viewed through warped glass. Navigation systems failed, recalibrated, failed again. This was not an attack. It was infrastructure. Human scientists called it a containment framework, a controlled manipulation of gravity, space-time curvature, and hyperspace flow designed to limit Dominion mobility without triggering catastrophic collapse. It was unprecedented, dangerous, and already active. Dominion fleets slowed, not by force, but by physics turning against them. The Council watched in growing horror and awe as projections shifted. Dominion advance vectors bent, collapsed, or vanished entirely. Regions once open to rapid invasion became labyrinths of constrained movement. Humanity had not entered the war yet. They had redefined it. A final message from unified human command reached every major power, Council and Dominion alike. This conflict will not be decided by panic or pride, it stated. It will be decided by control. No threats followed. No demands. Humanity did not need them. They had made their decision long before the Council asked for help. They would not rush to save a galaxy that had abandoned them. They would stabilize it first. And when humanity finally chose to act openly, it would not be out of desperation or forgiveness. It would be because the moment was right. Space continued to tremble. And for the first time, the galaxy understood that humanity was no longer reacting to events. They were setting the terms of reality itself. The war did not begin with a charge or a declaration. It began with silence. Along the fractured front lines where Dominion fleets pressed deeper into Council space, reality folded with unnatural precision. No hyperspace flares. No warning signatures. One moment the void was empty. The next, humanity was there. Human fleets emerged in perfect silence, their transitions so clean that Dominion sensors registered them only after the formations had fully resolved. Thousands of vessels held position without drift or collision, aligned with mathematical perfection as if space itself had been measured and claimed in advance. They were massive. They were precise. They were unstoppable. There were no banners, no symbols of intimidation. The fleets did not advance, did not posture. They simply existed. Dominion command reacted instantly. Targeting matrices spun up. Weapon systems charged. Attack formations shifted to engage. Nothing fired. A single transmission cut through every frequency at once. Council channels, Dominion command bands, civilian emergency nets. 2 words. Stand down. The message was calm, flat, final. The Dominion did not comply. Their opening salvo never reached its targets. Energy weapons curved away as space-time bent under controlled human manipulation. Kinetic projectiles lost cohesion, tearing themselves apart as localized gravity fields collapsed their trajectories. Entire Dominion squadrons found their drives locked, their ships frozen in relative stasis, immobilized without damage, trapped by physics they could not override. Then humanity moved. Not forward. Around. Human strike groups vanished and reappeared inside Dominion formations, bypassing outer defenses entirely. Command vessels were isolated and neutralized within seconds. Communications collapsed as quantum relays were severed or captured. Adaptive tactics failed without coordination to feed them. This was not a battle. It was disassembly. Where resistance persisted, it ended immediately. Human weapons targeted propulsion, power, and command, not populations, not planets. Dominion ships were left intact but helpless, drifting in controlled containment fields. Across multiple sectors, Dominion advances halted at once. Slave transports were intercepted and secured. Occupied worlds felt the change as Dominion overseers lost power, coordination, and escape routes simultaneously. The Council watched in stunned disbelief. This was warfare without chaos. Victory without devastation. Human fleets repositioned again, this time deeper, surrounding Dominion core territories in a flawless three-dimensional encirclement. Hyperspace corridors collapsed into monitored choke points. Every escape vector vanished. Only then did the Dominion attempt communication. Humanity answered once. "This war is over," the transmission said. "You simply failed to recognize when it ended." There was no final explosion. No heroic last stand. The Dominion stood down, not because they had been outgunned, but because combat itself had been denied to them. The war ended before the enemy truly understood it had begun. And across the galaxy, one truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity had not entered the war to fight. They had entered it to end it. Completely. On terms no one else had been allowed to set. Until now. The Galactic Council survived the war. Its authority did not. In the weeks that followed the Dominion's surrender, emergency assemblies gave way to reconstruction summits. The Council moved quickly to reclaim relevance, drafting resolutions, assigning oversight committees, and issuing statements declaring itself the guiding force behind the galaxy's salvation. Humanity did not argue. They simply continued working. Human fleets remained where they were needed, stabilizing hyperspace corridors, dismantling Dominion control systems, and overseeing the safe return of displaced populations. Trade routes reopened under human escort. Relief reached worlds the Council had debated saving and failed to reach in time. No permissions were requested. No approvals were sought. When the Council attempted to reassert authority, sending patrols to secure liberated systems, they arrived to find human logistics networks already established, defenses calibrated, and local governments restored. The Council tried sanctions. Human commerce did not slow. They tried political pressure. Human diplomats did not attend. They tried to bind humanity back into the old hierarchy with offers of elevated status, permanent seats, and shared command authority. The answer was polite and final. Humanity would not rule the galaxy. They had no desire for empires, councils, or dominion over others. They claimed no new territory. They imposed no laws beyond their borders. When stability was achieved, their fleets withdrew, quietly, completely. But the balance had shifted. Pirate activity vanished wherever human patrols appeared. Slaver networks collapsed overnight. Border wars stalled as fleets detected human signatures moving silently into observation range. No ultimatums were issued. No threats made. Presence was enough. The galaxy slowly understood the new reality. Power no longer flowed from ancient chambers or ceremonial authority. It flowed from capability, and from the willingness to act when others hesitated. Humanity had not replaced the Galactic Council. They had rendered it optional. They became something else entirely. A constant. A quiet certainty in a hostile universe. A line drawn not in law, but in action. If darkness rose again, if extinction threatened, if the galaxy once more turned its back on those who could not defend themselves, humanity would be there. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, not as judges, but as the force that arrived without warning, acted without hesitation, and left no doubt that some lines, once crossed, would never be forgiven again. Long-range sensors still watch for impossible distortions now, subtle tremors in spacetime that mean human fleets are already moving. Because the galaxy learned its lesson too late. Exiling humanity did not erase them. It revealed them. And the new reality is simple. The galaxy may choose its own path, but it will never face the darkness alone again.